Then on the other aspect of it is this, by the communications, the reason why the previous commission basically had to take action to eliminate it was because we had gotten those communications from Marlene Kirch saying, I will take away my plaques because I don't like basically the people who were winning and the way they were winning. Didn't like how the judging was going. And some of the criticism that was given of some of the commissioners is that they had given zeros to some people. Well, she also gave zeros to some people. And criticize one, let's criticize them all. Or maybe say, hey, judges can do what judges can do, and that's all fine. That was my basic take on that. So, but it was it blackmail? Was it close to it? Was it some form thereof? It was some form thereof, maybe close to it. Hey, I don't like how things are. I have power over these plaques. I'm going to take them back if I don't get my way. That has no position on any public award, and that was stated in writing. We've had it. It's been thrown out. It was made a matter of public record. We all know that it was something that closely resembled, that. And it's just plain wrong to have it go back to that. The judging was clearly tainted. I mean, that was knowing the results of how judges have already voted, knowing the scores that those judges have given to people, and putting it in writing before other people have voted, before the results are given out. It's bad news. You want to go back, you talk about prestige of the award. That killed the prestige of the award as it was. The commission had to do something. They want to put it back that way? That's wrong. If you want to make the Kirch Award, great. Make it. She controls the award. She nominates. She is the whole decision. She gives out plaques. The commission gives them. That's great. It's simple. It makes more sense. And that way, we know there's no compromise involved. If we go back to it, it will obviously be the same situation again. Where basically one person has control over a public award, as was stated by these communications and stated in previous meetings and basically proven in those meetings that is what previously occurred. That's basically it. Thank you.
I think we've heard overwhelming from the county advisory boards that they want to go back to this. We've heard overwhelming from emails, correspondence, prior conversations. This was the hot topic when I was reappointed to the commission. So I feel good about going forward with changing back policy 51 to the August 8, 2003 time frame.
Mr. Chairman, hopefully that we're not replowing old ground. Commissioner McLinch.
My comment will be real quick. I do see a need to move forward, so I support moving forward. Call it an emergency. If that's a technicality, I think that's fine. I think it is of significant interest to the advisory people, to the advisory boards, and to the people associated with wildlife. There is some time-sensitive issues associated with it. I'd like to make a comment on the creating a second award. Without vetting it out too much, my initial knee-jerk reaction is that it could potentially detract or devalue the Kirch Award. I'm not sure that it's necessary. I understand that potential to talk about it, but that's kind of what this award is.
Commissioner Drew.
Yeah, unless there's any other discussion, I'd be willing to make a motion, at least on the front half of this issue, and that motion would be to reinstate Commission Policy Number 51 to the Wayne E. Kirch Nevada Wildlife Conservation Award as effective and written August 8th, 2003.
Second.
And I would like to do that immediately, just so it's clear. That's probably
Effective immediately is what you thought?
Yes.
Okay. Any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Ray.
Thank you. I'd like to state basically the point of order on this. This is directly in violation of our policies. It's not been declared an emergency. If that's what you'd like to do so, are we going to just plainly violate the policy or just violate the spirit of it? So we're going to go ahead and do this. It's not an emergency, but we're just going to go. Is that what's going on?
I think that if Commissioner Drew, is the intent of the stipulation to be done immediately, that is your intent, that is an emergency and that it needs to be done immediately. Is that the way I understood it?
Absolutely, and I'll reference or ask the guy if there's something that I need to restate or the way I need to state the motion.
There's nothing required to restate the motion. If you would like to restate the motion to clarify that your comments meant for it to be an emergency in line with the policy, then you're welcome to do that.
So it's up to you. I mean, I understood what you were saying, but if you want to make it explicit so everybody can understand.
Sure, I'll make it explicit, so I retract my previous motion and offer a new one. So I move that Commission Policy Number 51, the Wayne E. Kirch, be reinstated to the Wayne E. Kirch Nevada Wildlife Conservation Award, effective date as of August 8, 2003, effective immediately upon the emergency provision in policy.
And I withdraw my original second, and I second his new motion.
Okay. The commission comment with regard to this part of the motion? This part of this agenda item, this motion? Seeing none, go ahead and call for a vote. All in favor, say aye. Aye. All opposed?
Hey.
I'm abstaining.
Okay. So everybody that was for the motion, raise your hand. And did you get all these are all the ayes?
Did Commissioner Shrove abstain?
And Commissioner Stroke abstained, and then against was Commissioners Million and Powell. Okay. So that leaves us with this agenda item with the issue of the exact word.
Mr. Chairman, can I have one comment? Now that you voted, we were supposed to solicit nominations for the Kirch Award beginning September through December or November. August is fine. Yeah. So anyway, we'll do that immediately. We'll direct staff to forge ahead.
Okay. So I guess when I look at this agenda, we still we have a little bit of dangling issue here, and that is to deal with the Commission Lifetime Commitment to Wildlife Award. And so Policy 51 has now been changed back to the 2003 version. That, I guess in my mind, eliminates pretty much automatically the Commission Lifetime Commitment Award unless we do something here. Is that how everybody's reading it? And so, is there any discussion from the Commission with regard to what we want to do there, or do we want to just let, if the CAPs are interested, somebody bring it back up to us, or I'm kind of confused as to where we go from here on that issue. Commissioner Robb.
I'd say send it back out to the cabs, see if they want to go forward with the lifetime commitment. I echo Mr. McNeach's comment from a few minutes ago that I don't know if we want to get too many awards out there and detract from the Kirch Award. We basically had one award that was up on a pedestal instead of two awards. I'd rather have a pedestal.
Okay. Anybody else?
Would it help to have a motion to deal with that particular policy?
It might not be a bad idea. I mean, because I guess the way I read this is that it almost looks like that it's kind of evaporated of its own by your motion. But I think that it would be a good idea to explicitly deal with it, and that way we just leave no misunderstanding.
Well, remove some of the discussion that's occurred. I would make a motion to take the concept of a Commission Lifetime Commitment to Wildlife Award and have that floated out to the county advisory boards for input and review and brought back to the Commission for further consideration. Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second to basically take back out to the cabs the Commission Lifetime Commitment to Wildlife Award and get their input on what their wishes are with respect to that. Anybody have any comments? Anybody on the Commission have any comments? Okay, all in favor of that motion, raise your hand by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, so we have basically 5-3. Got it? Okay. Okay, let's move on. Now, agenda item number 16, first reading, Commission Policy number 28, Mule Deer Management Guidelines. Commissioners Robb and Drew, for possible action. The Commission will have a first reading for proposed changes to Commission Policy number 28. The Commission may choose to retain Policy 28, modify all or part of Policy 28, or to eliminate Policy 28 in its entirety. The Commission may also take action to immediately suspend Policy 28 pending final action on revisions to Policy 28. So that's the agenda item, and so which of Commissioners Robb or Drew take the lead on this?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Again, thank you, Chairman. This was at the request of several of the cabs. The comments that I received on this were that basically the cab process, again, was not followed, wasn't properly vetted through the cabs. They didn't have adequate time to review and address this policy, and obviously it's a pretty important policy because it deals with the mule deer management guidelines. And it was adopted despite the wishes of the majority of the cabs. So really, rather than going through this line by line and spelling out some of the fatal flaws that I've personally seen, I'd rather hear from the cabs and see what their
Okay. Any other? Okay, Commissioner Ray.
Before we go into in detail, similar question to the last item. Are we going to once again ignore policy number 1, or are we going to have a second reading? I know I had a couple committee members who, one was the assemblyman that was planning on coming, but they figured it'd probably better to come to the second reading when it was actually going to be taking place. Should we? Because they wanted to take it, actually there was some confusion there because they were thinking this was going to be Las Vegas meetings. They had a prior schedule of the commission. He had the old schedule. And so he was thinking, yeah, I'll come to the Reno one. Anyways, is that if the case is that you guys are planning on violating policy number 1 and changing this policy now, then I guess I need to go into more in depth. Or
okay. Yeah, I would say that if your argument's the same as the commission would, I think we've got that. And but I will point out that in this particular agenda item, I have specifically stated that the commission may also take action to immediately suspend Policy 28 pending final action on the revision to Policy 28. So we can certainly have a second reading if we so choose on this particular policy. However, the agenda item makes it very clear that as to a motion to suspend it immediately, we don't have to have any kind of second reading on that. But that can occur today.
all right, let me go. Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Once again, per commission policy, proposed policies, amendments or requests to repeal policies, which basically by doing that, you're basically repealing it. Let's see, the commission will have a minimum of 2 readings of proposed policy in public meetings before the commission takes action to adopt, amend, repeal, or disapprove. And this would follow under that category. It's basically an all-inclusive thing, unless the policy is declared an emergency, in which case. So if you guys are talking about wanting to take action that would constitute an emergency, then I would start, I guess, going into the.
Okay, well, let me just address that because you can make a little literal reading of it if you want, but the language inside the agenda, in the agenda, it basically says immediately suspend. So if the position that I am taking and that I think is a reasonable interpretation is that is a tacit declaration that we have an emergency and that we're going to do something. And within the agenda item itself, it clearly indicates that we can move to suspend. Doesn't say anything about changing the policy at that point in time with regard to reading 1 or reading 2. So anyway,
then I'll go through the policy then. Continue with my statement. Okay, let's go into this. This policy, first let's go over briefly the manner in which this came about. This came about in excess of a 2-year process. And that process was first started by then Chairman Lett, who asked advisory boards for a period approximately 1 year at every meeting to bring forward issues. Bring forward issues to put on the mule deer plan. Because we're going to have a mule deer committee. He talked about it, and we're talking for nearly, I think it might have been a full year or near that. Every committee item became a standing item on the agenda. This committee should do and he wanted, and we discussed, the commission stated, we'd really like to see the cabs form their own committees, come up with their own items, so that we can include those into the mule deer policy. We did have some comments come forward. The most thorough ones were from Lincoln County. There were some others, but and those items were brought forward actually as probably as a result of the one of the members from Lincoln County, the staff members, was put on the committee, as was the assemblyman. I was the chairman of that committee. We had a series of public meetings. One of them was before one of the commission meetings. We had most of them up in the part of the country where the largest portion of our deer herd is. In the Elko area, we invited cab comment at all times. It was specifically an agenda item on most of our agendas. We did have quite a bit of cab participation. We did indeed have a audio link at least the first couple meetings with Washoe County, and I think that eventually died because nobody was getting on the last time or two from Washoe County. So we had one here at the main office. There was an audio link down the phone, and we did get quite a bit of input there from some of the people who came. But you know, it was never a huge number. But these were advertised. We talked about it. And then there was some complaints to me, you know, we wanted to have more input. Okay, well, we had a meeting over in Ely, scheduled it immediately before the commission meeting in the morning. We did get people, we got some input. All of that was taken. And it was taken by the committee. And the committee looked at it in these series of meetings. And we had another meeting, and these comments all came as we had on a direct result of that. The committee went through a huge amount of research. And the vast majority of statements contained in here, and I'll go through them, were direct result of things. Most of it came from staff, and a lot of it came from different publications out of WAFA. Some of the stuff that really, actually, a lot of the wording, it's interesting, came out of were the habitat guidelines for mule deer, Intermountain West ecoregion. Was this book that came out from WAFA. They had the guidelines for monitoring mule deer populations. From that, and this was the mule deer working group. We also had several documents specifically that our mule deer biologist, Mr. Wasley, who is the staff member, came up with. And a lot of the items in here, I will state, were direct quotes from these people, and a lot of the wording. And this policy was directly focused around one issue, and that one issue is thrown out into the first line of item policy number 1. Department of Wildlife should actively pursue enhancing game populations by setting and reaching game production goals. Because it became very evident that we have no game production goals. We should set goals, and this being a broad policy, there was a lot of discussion. Well, you should set them by doing this. You should set them by doing that. Well, as a broad policy, we should leave it at that as a policy level. We need to get goals. It did not say NDOW needs to use whatever particular methodology. We need some bloody goals, guys. When do we know that our deer population are healthy? When do we know they're not healthy? When do we know what? We're just sitting here, running around in the dark, and that's become evident, what is good. Well, we're just kind of going year to year. How does it look? We needed some kind of goals. If you don't have goals, you don't know when you've met them. That's the committee came up with. And then there was items there within that about, the structure of NDOW should be based around meeting at least a portion of NDOW that deals with the funding comes from mule deer, as it says there, should be designed around those goals. We should come up with goals, design the agency personnel positions around those goals. Great. Item number 2, there was not, I don't think you'd find that terribly offensive there. Should develop and maintain cooperative structure, positive communication, local interests, CAP process, Mule Deer and Wildlife Commission, channeled through them. That's great. Some of this is current practice. A lot of these items, there's several of them here, I should say, several of them are current practice, some are not. Item number 1 is not. Item number 2 appears to be basically current practice. We need to put it in policy. Item number 3, Department of Wildlife Commissioners should rely only upon solid scientific methods in considering range carrying capacity. because we came up with, there was a lot of speculation out there, but when we asked for the hard numbers, there is no data. What we came up with, we could find zero data, zero hard data on carrying capacity. We talk about carrying capacity all the time. Everybody talks about carrying capacity, but there's no data. We're talking about carrying capacity based upon zero data. We asked for the data, we looked for the data, we begged for the data, we pleaded that there was zero. And we have communications to that effect, but there is zero data. Anybody comes up and says, carrying capacity, you got no data, so what are you basing it upon? You're basing it upon some arbitrary, some method, socially motivated. What's motivating this? We don't know. Apparently, no data. If there was data, please bring it to us. That was brought up many times. We saw none. At many meetings it was brought up. Mule deer harvest, further on to number 3, mule deer harvest should be reduced, eliminated in area units for populations of below objective population goals. Reduced or eliminated? Hey, whether that's by 1% or eliminated. If they're below the goals, it's probably a good idea not to be over-harvesting that population. And then it goes on, and don't harvest.
Point of order, Commissioner Ring. Let me, I appreciate, that you're trying to explain what it is that the policy says, and I think we all, from all of the prior versions that we saw before it got finalized, everything have a feel for that. But what the issue here is not the substance of the policy, and it is to a certain extent as to what we want to do with the policy, but I think that they maybe if we hear from the cabs, and because I understand that some of the cabs don't necessarily want the policy to go away. What we're talking about is what do we want to do with this policy, on a go-forward basis, so I don't know how productive it's going to be for you to go line by line through this policy and tell us what it says now. I think we all know, we have read it, the points that have been brought up as to the reason why that we need to move forward have to do with the cabs not having input into the process to weigh in on what the policies say. And so,
I'm trying to address those points through my discussion here of this, and I mean, I'll go over that. But first we got a few new members on the commission that weren't around, and some of this is historically. How did we come up with these ideas? A lot of these ideas came out through the cab process. We had cab process. I mean, people say you don't have cab process. I know it's interesting. I mean, we've heard from some people, the Elko cab specifically state, hey, you haven't included our cab. You had a lot of the meetings in Elko. We had some of the cab members participate. The members that are saying that participated in a couple meetings and didn't show up to the rest of them. Were they accessible to them? Heck, some of them were in the places where they have their meetings. It was in their court building. If it wasn't accessible to that particular cab, I mean, hey, what's the beat? We were going to have cab process audio link down to Las Vegas, but there wasn't enough participation to warrant it in that particular case. They were all invited to these meetings, and it wasn't one. It was many, and every commission meeting in between. And so I'm just trying to go over these points and to make sure that people know about it that are new on the commission.
Can I clarify my issues?
I finish my points, and then you can call the floor, get 50 other people to the floor, and I'll be done, and then you'll be done with me, and you move on with life. I think that would be appropriate at this time. Department of Wildlife, and we'll go over to some of these things. That the people, some of the biggest criticisms that we got from some groups was item number 4. We should back and encourage well-managed grazing. That, and it is interesting, the department came out in apparent opposition to the grazing industry in this, and very much in opposition to it. And I'll work on that. Department of Wildlife, number 5. Number 5 was a fairly minor item. We should go ahead and look at that. That came actually from CAB input. That was number 5. We had CAB input on that item, and that's why that was included in there, because some people from different CABs brought up the minimal supplementation they thought might be good. And rather than writing a policy, you've got to do it, hey, this is a really good idea. What this was focused on, because mostly from public input, was, hey, you need to have a policy that focuses on the items that you can do something about. Not on the items like the weather, that you can't really do anything about. What good's a policy saying we should have more rain? I mean, unless you're talking about me personally, trying to find more rain is kind of an issue, you know what I mean? My kids aren't quite old enough to be on the commission, you know what I mean? But anyways,
No comment.
trying to put a little levity in the middle of this. Okay, a lot of these, if you look at number 6, number 8, those items very closely mirror what we heard yesterday from the BLM people on how that is done. A lot of that came from a document that we saw that the BLM and other government agents had written, and from pub and from the comments. We came through and, hey, we should really focus on, specifically here, we should really focus on instead of suppression, that is not effective and is proven not effective, we should focus on prevention. And there's a few things, minor, you know, they might be minor, but they're the only real active things the commission could do. And that's to focus on those items. So that's where those items basically came about with 6, 7, and 8. Number 9, the Department of Wildlife should utilize all possible methods to assist and encourage landowners. That came out in the public hearing. The one main issue around mule deer population, specifically in central and southern parts of Nevada, and this was discussed at length, and it had tremendous CAB input on these items, that, hey, water is the major issue. That's why people build guzzlers, you know? But also, that the Department of Wildlife should, whenever it's possible, shoot all possible methods to encourage private landowners and public land leaseholders in development and maintenance of all water sources and meadows. Because we had many of landowners showed up at our meetings. There was ranchers, there was all kinds of people showed up, and a bunch of them brought these methods forth. This was the result of the public process that took place at these meetings. That was a direct result. We didn't show up with this thing written and come out, and these public people showed up and, hey, we could use a little help. A lot of them showed up, hey, you know, I'm a rancher, I do this, I do that. These guys are expert at paperwork, basically helping, you know, going through the governmental process. If they give us a little bit of help with the paperwork end of it, then I'd be more than happy to maybe do something, help them do something with my land, because I'm not an expert at that. It was a very good methodology. More than even what's in here, I'm talking about the process in which it came about. It was the public at these meetings. And we didn't have much commission. There was a couple commissioners came to a couple meetings, but there wasn't a tremendous amount. They're all invited. Actually, we talked about trying to get them to call in, but we didn't seem to have a whole lot of interest in having them call into the meetings. Although we did have some other commissioner participation. You know, and number 10 kind of follows along with the energy development items. That was a lot of what came out of the CAP process. This was paragraph 10 came right out of Lincoln County. So it was basically a consolidation of a few pages that Lincoln County had produced, and we consolidated it into a general policy form as item number 10. That came out of the process. Item number 11, shall practice intensive predation control in areas where deer populations are low in relation to game production goals. All of this seems to go back to game production goals. If you got your goal and it's down, then you should concentrate in those areas. Now, that doesn't sound like too bad of an idea. Why are we trying to, as our current agenda item states, immediately suspend a policy that has good ideas and should be applicable immediately. These to all aspects. These are really good ideas that came out of the public process. Wildlife Commission must require sound scientific data when setting seasons and quotas. What's wrong with that? Then the next item I know was interesting. We came out with some of the WAFWA item. Came back saying, you know, there's a problem with the science on that. Hey, however, what's in there in all the WAFWA guidelines? If you look at each one of these different books, you'll see in there that stress is a major factor on mule deer. This came out of a lot of the public inputs that was saying, hey, you might need to follow some of these cowboy guidelines. And it came out from staff. Ronnie Wasley, he was a part of that process. He said, you know, you need to follow some of the stuff that's in here. We picked out the best points. That was some of the best points that we need to have. And we felt, as the committee came up with the numbers, in that we need to come up with something as a general guideline. If stress is such a huge factor, then you need to come up with some maximum length of time. We can't be hunting them 365. Maybe we shouldn't be hunting them 90. So we came up with the numbers as a guideline that, hey, when they're way low, when they're not even within 20% of your goals, then maybe you should make sure you cut those seasons down somehow, in some way, to less than, not exceed 60 days. And of course, that would be up to the commission at a later date. But as a general guideline, right now, we don't have guidelines. We used to have a plan. It expired. NDOW had a plan that expired in 2009. Staff did not come up with a revision from that plan. It was 2000, it expired a year and a half ago. Nothing came out. And it was a fairly vaguely worded plan. This plan eliminated a lot of that, mostly from public input that we got at all these meetings. We had the anti-hunting movement showed up. We had a presentation by Dr. Moldy at some of our meetings. This was not done in a vacuum, as has been purported to happen, and that's why, I mean, what I've heard, and maybe I'm wrong on the motivation, but what I've heard is immediately suspended because the cats didn't have good enough input. We didn't hear about it. We didn't know it was in there. We haven't had comments. Hey, the commission, that happened at commission meeting after commission meeting. They were asked, what do you want in there? What do you want in there? We incorporated all the ideas that we saw that were sound and that we thought that ended up actually do something about into this policy. And that is kind of the history behind it. It was not done in a vacuum. That's basically the point I'm trying to make, especially the new commissioners. This was done as a result of a huge process. And hey, I would think, hey, if the commission wants to go ahead and modify something here and there, and we want to talk about it, great. There might be grounds for it. This is not a perfect policy. I don't know that there's one perfect policy written on the face of the planet. Great. What there is not grounds to immediately suspend some policy because you want to change certain aspects of it. Great. Hey, come up with your changes. We'll talk about them next. We'll have first reading of those changes at the next meeting. And actually, you could do it on 2 separate days and get those effective at our next meeting. Great. Let's have them out. If you don't like the ideas that are there, great. Come up with alternatives, and let's talk about them. That is what should really happen through this process. We had really no good ideas, really good alternatives brought forward to the commission. And we asked, and we asked, and we asked, and you can see on there, if you look at our old agendas, it was on an item on every single agenda. All right. Thank you.
Mostly just a point of clarification. I'm not here to belittle the people that contributed to this report. I think there's some good ideas in there. I think there's some bad ideas in there. But I'm not going to sit here and debate the merits of every single line by line. The concern I have, and the reason it was brought to me as a CAT or a sportsman representative, was because the process that the folks who brought this to me felt was flawed. And some of the questions I got from them, and if you can answer them, great. Questions were, who wrote the final plans? How long did the entire committee have to review the final plan? And how long did the CABs have to review the plan? Now, if you can answer those for me in some sort of sustainable manner, and the CABs want to keep this policy in place, fine.
All right. Great question. All right, let's go. Let me go over each one of them. What's the first one? Was okay. You want to go? Who wrote the final plan? And just so I get them clear, who wrote the final plan? The members of the committee wrote the final plan. What we did is the committee divided a portion up to each one of its members, and sometimes groups of 2 members, so that way it wouldn't make a quorum. And we went first. We talked with the director about how we come up with this. And we were specifically told that don't, and I'm trying to think of exact quote was, don't expect us, we don't have enough staff time to write this, I hope you don't expect our staff to be able to write this. So it was made abundantly clear to us that staff was not going to be drafting this document. That was the statement we had, and that was told directly to me. And therefore, well, okay, no problem. If that's the way it is, then the committee will do it. And the committee members did. They each submitted a portion of it. They took one upon themselves and hey, you take the public comment to that section. So that's who wrote it. We wrote it as a conglomeration. They sent them to me and I consolidated them basically word for word except for typographical stuff. I did the secretarial end of it, but it directly reflected exactly. And then we had a meeting and it came up and they had a few weeks to look at it. Hey, and the CABs of course did too. So that's how it went. And then following, we had 2 meetings, and then it came up for approval by 1 or 2 commission meetings. There was a good month plus from that until it was finally totally approved. Actually, from that came up, the findings, the Mule Deer, of the findings of the committee came up, and then that was consolidated into the policy. Okay. Next point was, how long did the commission have?
I think you answered both of those, and basically what you're saying is that each committee member had a few weeks to review the final draft,
Yep.
and that each cab had a few weeks to review the final draft. And so, with that being, those were the main questions that I got from the people who brought this up. So again, I'm interested to see what they have to say, and we'll go from there.
Okay, so go ahead and take it up to the cabs. First hand up was Tom Castanella. He beat you.
For the record, Tom Castanelli with Humboldt County. For the record, Humboldt County did not put anything into this. We were asked, but I knew from the start of this, or I shouldn't say we knew from the start of this, we discussed this from the beginning, what was about to happen. There was an agendized commission, and they were going to take what they wanted out of this. And we felt from the very beginning of this program, and you can look through there, there's not one recommendation in this that Humboldt County sent, because we did not make it. We felt from the very beginning that we had a pretty good process going into this, and we did not want to change it at that point, especially with the commission that was sitting at that time. There was some good ideas brought up, but we felt that they were picked and choose from by this commission and by the committee itself that was formed up through the commission, not this commission, the sitting commission at that time. And that's why we voted at this meeting to abolish 28. And we feel if we're going to write this again, and I'd like to state, when this did come in front of the counties, here again, there wasn't a county that didn't go against this when they did give it to us for that week that we had to look at it. We were all opposed to it. I don't remember one county, and I may be wrong on this, but I don't remember one county going for this policy. And we got it rammed through again. And for those reasons, Humboldt County voted to abolish it. If you want to start over, and you can utilize some of the things in it and get county's input and sportsman's input, maybe it's a good idea. But we did feel that the existing field day plans that we had were plenty fine for what we were getting into. Thank you.
Thanks. Kim. Oh, I think Kim was saying.
They're going to hate me for this. For the record, Ken Wellington, Elko County. Several things. First of all, I'd like to clarify that Mr. Carpenter is not an assemblyman. He's a business owner, just as I am. In fact, I can't even tell you about the last time, a partner probably could, that he even held a hunting license. That committee was established with 4 members of it being ranching families and 1 sportsman on that committee. I did file a complaint when the initial copy came out of the commission, because we received it on Wednesday, the day of our meeting. And at that point, we were told to give comment on it. I filed a complaint with the Attorney General's office and sent a letter to Mr. Rain regarding that. I attended all but 2 of the meetings. Another CAB member from Elko was present at the other meetings, because I am a business owner, and in fact we have 2 businesses, and I was tied up several times that I couldn't break loose to get over there. However, the input, when we began giving the input, I initially spoke to one of the committee members who was a ranching member. I asked him and was trying to give a little direction on how they might want to do it, and I told him at that time that they might want to work with the department to look at some of the information they'd already put forward and the statistics they had set. And his comment was to me, why would we do that? At that point, it was obvious the direction of that committee and where it was going. We were not, the county advisory board, my county advisory board was not part of the process. We tried to be. We gave input during some of the commission meetings when then Chairman Lent was asking. And we had already created a mule deer committee, which obviously we disbanded after the other one started because of the lack of working that we had with the committee, the mule deer committee that was created by Commissioner Rain and Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you. Jay? Mr. Jay?
I have a few exceptions here. Scott, if you remember the first time you met me was in Winnemucca. We were sitting at a meeting. I was in the back of the room, you came back, sat down beside me, and says, "What do you think of the deer policy?" And like I told you, I was not fully aware of a lot of problems, and you told me at that time you were going to change them. Very good. The one thing you didn't know, and you didn't find out till later, is that I was a cab member. And you asked me what I thought of the cabs. I told you I thought they did a fair job. You told me, well, we don't have to listen to everything they put out, and they will probably be a lot less before I'm out of office. Well, they're not a lot less. They're still here. And I was here. Here's the first mule deer report. I mean, it was absolutely, I don't know, it had some points in it. It was unenforceable and everything. It says passed unanimously 18 November 2010. This came to me the day after our meeting. And I knew that Tony Walsley had been there, or been part of it. So I called Tony in, he's not here. Asked him immediately, I says, "What in the hell is going on? This is garbage." And he said, "I'm sorry, I recommended against it. They would not listen to it." At that time, they weren't listening to the county game boards. We'd done policy 51. They weren't listening to us. They would pay no attention and override. This thing came up on the floor, and there was one member from one county game board, and he was a member of the committee, and he did not vote against it. The rest of us stood up and asked for it to be done away with, and let's do something else. Absolutely nobody listened. This went on through that, and I think there was something else that came up. But you're saying you had no cab input. Of course you had no cab input. You weren't listening to us. You were voting against everything the cabs had said up here as a group and said. And it wasn't the one guy was saying it. It was every single cab that was represented. And, you know, you're not going to get input when you don't listen. So, Lyon County, we'll get right down to the point. Lyon County asked to have this done away with. We're all in favor of going back, going through it, and yes, we need a deer policy. But I think we need cab input on it, we need public input on it, and we don't need just a few ranchers' input. You know, when the committee is made up or stacked, we're not going to get the results we want. I think it needs to be put out there. I would like to see it done away with, Lyon County would, and go back through the process. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Rex?
Good afternoon, Rex Flowers, Washington County Advisory Board. As a member of Washington County Advisory Board, I was assigned to follow the Deer Restoration Committee when it was initiated in 2009 by the then Chairman Glenn. They held 5 or 6 meetings over the almost 2 years that this went on. Those are all right online at the end outside. Minute meetings are not available as of the last meeting they had, but I attended telephonically because all meetings were held in Northeast Nevada, which was not feasible for us to travel. There was very little input. I mean, I got to speak. I'm not going to deny that. I did get to speak. But to me, the whole thing from the very beginning and what I could read into it, when they met, there was a lot of disparaging remarks were made against Endow at the time and the management practices of Endow. There was very little following of, there was a lot of talk about what used to be, not what is, or the practices they wanted to institute had to do with practice along the same line as raising cattle. But when you raise cattle, you have a controlled environment. When you raise deer, it is not a controlled environment. There's too many flaws in it. I made a statement the other night at our meeting that I felt this policy had been a vendetta against Endow. There was no reason for this policy. We have a mule deer plan in place. It was written, I believe, in 2000. Should have been updated in 2010. And they instead chose to take this policy forward, policy 28. I feel it was done as a replacement so they didn't have to follow the Endow mule deer plan, which would have been just as easy to update. So it changed with the times. Our board voted to suspend policy 28 effective immediately. And I would ask that you just do away with it personally and go back to the mule deer plan and update it. And that's what thank you.
Okay, thanks, Rex. Douglas? Mr. Cook?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Bob Cook with Douglas County CAB. This item came up on our agenda and our board was adamantly opposed to accepting it. They felt that we should revoke it, and they want the commission to go back and work with Tony Wasley to form a professional mule deer plan or update the one that we have. They felt there were several things missing. It was not what it was intended in the initial mule deer report. There was too many components missing, and they didn't talk enough about better control. For those reasons, Douglas County voted to revoke. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Jesse Churchill?
Real quick, Jesse Ladden, Churchill County. Our board did have a discussion on this, and they did unanimously vote to suspend policy 28 and basically start over.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Paul.
Paul Harris, Clark County CAB. And Clark County CAB did also vote to suspend the current mule deer plan, and my recommendation was that the commission would have both CAB and public comments in revising this. I mean, there are certainly some good aspects of this. Number 7, where free wood cutting to cut back on pinyon juniper, I think it's a great idea. The development of water sources, number 9, on private lands, having Endow involved with energy development, all those are great ideas. But I can point out one, Mr. Raines, that was everybody in the law, because this came up in the meeting in Las Vegas, and I can tell you everybody there almost fell out of their chairs, and that was to stop the either sex for the youth hunt. And that, which basically is number 4, paragraph 2 of number 4, which is although harvest should cease. And that was news to all the cabs and the cab members that were there that I spoke to, and members of the public just about fell out. The youth hunt is something that is a phenomenal program that we have. It allows young people to get out and hunt, and there are some times when they can't find a buck. And killing a doe is just as exciting to them as killing a buck. And we were absolutely 1,000% against that. That's our position.
Thank you. Dave?
Dave Bradfield, Lincoln County. As has been stated before, our chairman, Corey Lytle, was involved on the committee to rewrite this policy 28. I don't recall any time of us voting as a CAB that we accepted the policy as it was being voted on. We denied it every time just because of the way it was written. But
Our comments on this for today is that a more broad policy be adopted where specific management guidelines are taken from policy 28 and brought into the management plan of 2006, but with a more specific management guidelines involved for the mule deer.
Thank you. Okay, any other cab? Go ahead, Mr. Young.
For the record, Juliana Carson Advisory Board, our board voted unanimously that the commission may take action to immediately suspend policy 28 pending final action on revisions of policy 28.
Okay, thank you. Any other cabs? Okay, I'll, public,
Rich Smith.
Rick Smith, speaking for myself. I listened to Chairman Rain's comments about, very little cab input, and boy, I gotta disagree with that. I think you guys have just heard how much the cabs were trying to give input and how much it was ignored. Don't look at me like that. You were there too. 2 years ago, a little over 2 years ago, in Elko, at the commission meeting, we had some discussions, and the cabs were really trying to emphasize that they weren't being heard, and we were asking to do something about it. I went to, during one of the breaks, I went to then Chairman Lent, and he said, if you really want cab input, put a cab member on each one of the subcommittees. Give them some voting power to it. His comment was, I wouldn't put you on anything unless maybe the road committee. That was his comment. Quote. That's the type of input the commission was looking at back then. They didn't want to hear what the cabs said. They didn't want to hear what the public said. To say that the cabs were always in opposition to the commission, no, that's not true. When the cabs agreed with the commission, then it was all rosy and fine. But when the cabs were opposed, they didn't want to hear it. So I think you should suspend it and we should start over.
thank you.
Remember that? Oh, I'll bet you do. No, you just have a short
Judy
memory.
Carey.
Chairman McMath and members of the board, my name is Judy Karen for the record, and today I'm speaking on behalf of the Coalition of Nevada's Wildlife. We suggest, I'm eating a piece of candy, my mouth was dry, sorry, that this policy be suspended immediately, go out to the public, cabs, sports groups, and the public to be vetted correctly. The biggest thing during the procedures for this committee is, and I'm not going to reiterate what all the cabs have said, we support what they say, we did have a mule deer policy in place that Tony Wellesley and the department had worked on. The biggest gripe that we kept hearing, and from our own perspective, is the support material was not made available to the public in a timely manner to come forward to give opinion and ask questions. We feel like it was circumvented, held back, some of the draft minutes also. I was aware from the Attorney General's office that support material, what is written up in statute, learned very plainly the policy is support material can be available to the public as when it is available to the committee. There were times material changed hands at the commission meetings, but that was the first time the public got to see it on different policies. So I think this should be suspended, give the public an opportunity to vent it with all working groups, the biologists having input, the department, and everyone, and we should go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Belding.
Mel Belding, Washoe County. Couple sayings, I guess, probably pretty much the line here. What goes around comes around. I watched a movie just the other night, and I've seen it several times. This reminds me of it really, really good. It's called Come the Horseman. It's with James Caan. This old cowboy, he finally gets killed in the end, but he says, he says, when a dog bites a bull in the nose, he might bite too hard, and that bull might turn around and kill him. And this is what we see here. This is what I see here today. And I got to say something. I mean, you know, I hear about water developments and all this stuff, and I've been fighting for about 3 years now trying to get some water developments going. I had nothing but a fight from this commission. Same with planting sheep, the last commission. And I'm going to listen to the biologists every time. And it's a lot about habitat, and I'll give it to you, it's a lot about predators too. But I'm sure this guy right here knows, and especially that guy right there knows, you set goals when you're a cowboy, and there's too many things that can kill you on those goals. And how anyone can tell a biologist, and this is what you did with your plan, guys, you told the biologist if he didn't meet those goals, I don't need to say, if he didn't meet those goals, he was going to get fired. That was in the first read. That was in your first writings, or maybe the second one. But then it got changed out of there. I'm thinking to myself, how can anyone going to fire a biologist because he didn't meet his goals? How can we expect a biologist to meet those goals? How can I expect Mr. Casanelli that if he tells me he's got 400 mother cows, that by God I better see 306 calves on the ground next year? I can't do that. He knows he can't do it. We cannot predict the weather, like you said. We can't predict the water. But you know, I think it goes back to what goes around comes around. There's a new sheriff in town. I'm glad to see it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else from the
Earl
room?
Went has an all-car again.
One more, Kev. Glenn, and then Mr. Dr.
Glenn Bunch, Mineral County. I wasn't going to get into this because we didn't have a meeting, so we didn't have a quorum, so we didn't make a decision on it. But my memory plays back in time. The information that was being requested, if I can't get the wording exactly, but it was something to the effect of what do we feel is in our county we could do to enhance the deer population. In Mineral County, there's been 2 studies done by doctors from the state of Nevada. I had one copy in my file at home. I turned it in to Mr. Wasley and asked him if he'd seen it. And he looked at it and he said, no, I have not. But the doctor who did it, he says, I'm working with him right now on another study in California. And he was great to have that on hand. So I didn't step forward and put this into the input of that, but after sitting and reading through that, what I gave them was all range habitat. Because Mineral County, our deer herd is so small, it was range habitat. They needed to improve range habitat. In Mineral County, we don't have farms and ranches and grassy meadows. We have desert, and we hunt desert canyon. And so, you know, it was range habitat. That's what come back. We done a deer collection. We went out and we physically harvested does in the months of February and March. And at that time is when I learned the difference between a buck and a doe when they don't have horns. Because we couldn't do any sampling of the buck, they had to be does. And we took down 30 does in Mineral County. And the board was almost lynched because of the slaughter that we did of the does. So when the results came back from that study that it was range habitat, every one of the does that we took down had twins. Some of them had triplets, and the doctor said upon birth, probably one of them would be still. So, you know, it all come back to range habitat, and that's what kept coming back, and that's what Tony Wasley kept saying. So, you know, I'm looking at all of this, and there's a slight recommendation for range habitat, but most of it was a goal, setting goals, and I just don't know. I don't know what, this didn't make sense to me at the time, so we didn't do anything with it. So, sorry.
Mr. Chairman, because of our deer loss, and I talked about it yesterday, we've lost 70% of our deer in the last 20 years. And I gave the numbers. In '88, we had 240,000 deer, and '09, we had 106,000 deer by NDOW, own estimate. And I put it on the agenda for input from cabs for over a year. And you go look at the minutes, you were part of the commission, I said, what do you want? The cabs had over a year to come up with input, and only very few cabs did. And I appointed a committee because we have to do something on our deer. And Judy Karen was a private citizen, and she was appointed by the Washoe County Board as a rep to this tri-county deer that they had in Carson and Douglas County. And because no cab member wanted to do it, I was at the meeting, and no cab member wanted to do it. They didn't have the time, so we had a private citizen do it. And at the cab meeting, it kept saying at Washoe County, no report, no report. They didn't have a meeting. So the tri-county deer task force never had meetings, no input, nothing was done. And so we passed this as a starting point. I mean, I'm not saying there's a lot of things I didn't agree with, but let's get something going because we have to do something. And I got something here. Has any of the commissioners read this management plan for mule deer or this mule deer population dynamics? Raise your hand if you read it. Okay, very few people have recently. And this is a 2006 plan, and this is a 2004 plan. They're antiquated. They haven't updated. NDOW would not update their plans, so I put a committee in to update our mule because without that, we're doomed. The deer are doomed. We have to do something. And that is the reason that we did the Mule Deer Committee. And 17 committee members from every county advisory board on a committee. There was no money. It's an impossible, unworkable situation. It's like having 20 members from each county on the commission. You cannot function with that big a committee. And that was an unworkable solution there because they couldn't travel and to meet in one spot would never get anything done. And I think you know that would be an impossible situation. And by abolishing this deer committee and not taking action to do anything else, this new commission is showing they have no interest on bringing our deer back. Absolutely. And it's quite apparent that in over 2 decades, this department has not had a successful deer plan. The only successful plan we've had is a retirement and a pension plan.
Thank you. Any further cab or public comment? Policy 28. Okay, I'll bring back to the commission then Commissioner Robb.
I've heard from Commissioner Rain and former Commissioner Darrell Lynn that NDOW didn't have a plan. From the time I've been around the commission, Bighorn Sheep Management Plan, Central Nevada Elk Plan, Mule Deer Plan, they were all commission-generated plans. The commissioners sat on, they were appointed by the commission. That's how they came into being. So if they didn't have a plan and it expired, the only one that commission had the plan was themselves. It was a good plan that they could have looked at and made updates to. But instead, we had our mule deer specialist biologist hijacked to deal with this that we're trying to get rid of today. So instead of going forward on productive things that we could have been going forward on, addressing changes in our mule deer plan that needed to go forward, Tony spent time in a hijack situation, kind of fighting to get some sanity out of what this document is. So with that, that's the end of my comments.
Commissioner Rain.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, look, to say that Tony was hijacked is beyond unfair, especially if you knew what was in this document. There are so many quotes in here. This wording, did I come up with this exact wording? Who developed this wording? Where did this wording come from? Many of them came directly out of his mouth. He is probably the most often quoted. He is clearly the most often quoted individual in here, in this plan, in the direct wording. He helped us wordsmith many of the words in here, the statements, when we're talking about remember, here's a good one. This is Tony was well managed. If you're going to talk about grazing, what we need for mule deer is well-managed, high-intensity, short duration, rotational grazing, utilizing maximum variation in time and grazing cycles. You know, those are his words that we put into the plan. You know, there's a lot of that in here. And a lot of them when we came up with wordsmithing, hey, we relied on him actually to come up with a lot of these wording to come up there at. A few things here. One of which is, you know, we got some criticism of older versions of the plan. You know, hey, it's one of the older versions, and that was draft. When you're talking back to drafts, some of that was indeed due to the process by which we had various different people came up with pieces of it and tried to meld it into a whole. So you came up with some pretty strange stuff. We had oftentimes had two different groups that, you know, they were working on separate items. They'd come up with an item. Well, how do we meld that into one? So we put the ideas that came out of both of them, and sometimes they were twisted. That's why they were draft. I mean, you and I talked about the last draft before the final version. Those are drafts before the final draft, you know, and some of that was, they'd send stuff in, well, what do they mean? Well, all right, well, we'll put in this and this to make sure we get all of it, and then we'll pick those out. A couple things. Mr. Carpenter not being an assemblyman, somebody needs to call the state, because I know he had this office down in Carson City for many, many years. He was a sitting assemblyman when this committee was going on. I need to call Mr. Carpenter because somebody finally found out that he really wasn't assemblyman. What? I don't get that. Anyways, we call the president for years after the president. We know he's not a sitting assemblyman now. He was until he was terminated out. He's been in government longer than I've probably been alive. Anyways, the statements the Ellicott County Advisory Board was not a part of the process. I mean, of all the county advisory boards, other than perhaps Lincoln County, that is the most, you've got to be kidding me, statement there is. We assigned one of the Ellicott CAB members to write a portion of the policy. He was there, he had some really good ideas. We asked him to write up a portion of the policy for us. And some of those words are in this. That was actually words that was directly written by a member who wasn't of the committee. I think he was probably one of the only people that wasn't on the committee that was actually assigned to write a piece of the policy. That was a member of the Ellicott CAB. Many different Ellicott CAB members showed up and weighed in on this. It wasn't only just Mr. Wellington. There were several people there at different meetings. They weren't all there all at one meeting. We had many of them there, and many of them showed up. Characterizations there, Mr. Smith said, you know, that I said that we had very little CAB input. Well, hey, if I did say that, I must have spoken out of the wrong ear. As I said, you know, maybe I said at some point we didn't maybe get as much as I wanted on a certain time. We got a lot of CAB input. A lot of it was put into this. If I was misstated that wrong before, I apologize. We did get a tremendous amount. You know, we were stated by Mr. Castanelli that this is an agendized commission, the previous version of the commission. Well, basically correct, yeah, it was an agendized commission. It was out in the open. We had the same agenda, we had the same mandate. Actually, our director, Mr. Mayor, was quoted in the newspaper many times saying the same thing. We were directed to bring back the mule deer population. That we had an agenda, absolutely we had an agenda. Bring back the mule deer population. Try to come up with ways, in good ways, in order to bring back the mule deer population. So we tried to come up with this plan. That, yes, we had an agenda. Now, what evil agenda was that? And that's the agenda that was followed the entire time. As far as that, you know, and you might want to talk, well, what about this other agenda with Kirch? We're not talking about mule deer. That was by far the main agenda of the commission, and it was stated publicly before every meeting there was to bring back the mule deer population. I don't at all recall some of the statements there, the comments Mr. Janae made. You know, I mean, I was a member of a CAB for a good half dozen years before I was on this commission. I very much respect the CAB process. I came to commission meetings as a CAB member beforehand. You know, I just don't get that. There may be some statement I got that, you know, a while ago maybe was somewhat out of context. I've never been disparaging whatsoever to the CABs. Furthermore, I was a portion thereof for a good number of years. And we did get a tremendous amount of CAB input. All right. Should we eliminate policy 26? Yeah, maybe. Oh, excuse me, thank you. Actually, it was 28 right here. Thank you for clarification. You know, this policy, and you know, appears to have basically not been implemented by the department. So for that aspect, hey, it's not been implemented. You know, I guess the question is what good is it? So, you know, that might be the one good reason to eliminate it. Hey, it hasn't been implemented by the department, and what appeared to be a violation of NRS, but whatever. That happens. Why do we need this policy? It is one of the few policies that actually requires the department to actually do something proactive. The direction has been to implement observational biology, not active, proactive items to actually increase the population. Just look at things, yeah, we need this many tags, that's been the general direction. And that has not been in the business of actively propagating the deer herds, and that is precisely the business we should be in. Well, and this outlines several very good methodologies. And if any 8 of them were implemented, we'd have a darn good chance at it. Whether or not it's in policy, the steps briefly outlined in this policy must be followed if we're ever to see a robust deer population again. But hey, you kill this policy, what are you killing? Oh, you're pissed at the last guys running the commission and whatever, and you're mad at them. Hey, don't worry about them. What about the mule deer population? We're talking about the mule deer population here. You're killing the mule deer population, and any good chance of seeing a significant increase in deer population. If the steps generally outlined, and generally outlined doesn't mean every bloody word. There is no bloody perfect. There's no perfect words in there. I'm British, mine's verbiage. If it's not followed, it is the hunters who will suffer. It's the deer that will suffer. It's the state that will suffer, and eventually we're going to have some. You're going to have not enough deer to sustain the budget as it is. You're worried about things. I'm worried about. We talked about sustainable yield. That's what this is about. We need a higher sustainable yield. And mule deer has been the cash crop. It's been the one crop that, and I'm saying in the way of hunter opportunity. It's been the cash crop hunter opportunity. It's a place where deer people can actually go out and hunt. As it is, we're losing it. We're losing it. And I don't think we have, our science, if we're lacking in one place, I wish our science on the deer was as good as it is on the bear situation. I'm making a prediction. You'll have another round of meetings. I mean, that could be a year, it could be forever. And if you don't follow this stuff, you'll come after much expense. You'll come another policy that contains too many politically correct statements. That contains too many items that aren't really recommending action. They'll just be talking about just more talk, rather than something that pays attention and something that pays attention to factors upon which we really don't have any control. And I'm afraid that we've come to another policy that has no teeth and ultimately lead to no net positive impact on the deer population. This policy was a darn good start as far as implementing some proactive policies. That's what it was about. It was indeed, as Mr. Casanelli said, it was part of the agenda of the commission. Our agenda was to help the deer population come back. Thank you.